I always thought the stories were a joke. You know the ones. Blurry news clips of people sprinting through automatic doors at 4 a.m., wrestling over a flat-screen TV. I'd see them, I'd laugh, and I'd think, that can't be real. It's just exaggeration for clicks. I truly believed the whole idea of Black Friday being dangerous was just a punchline, a funny little quirk of our culture. But in that moment, with the roar of the crowd becoming a physical force, with my wife and my dog lost somewhere in the crush, I wasn't shopping anymore. I was just trying to survive, to understand how a simple trip to the store became one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. We have to go back. Back to the beginning, when it was just a perfectly normal, chilly November morning. The day started like any other Friday after Thanksgiving. The air was thick with the ghost of yesterday's feast, that faint, sweet smell of turkey and pumpkin spice. I was at the kitchen counter, nursing some coffee and scrolling through my phone, when my wife, Linda, went into general mode. She was a whirlwind of energy, cross-referencing a meticulous list with a stack of store flyers spread across the table. "Okay, Henry," she said, her voice buzzing with strategic determination. "First stop is Big Box Bonanza for the television. 65 inches, 4K, and it's a doorbuster deal." A doorbuster. Can you believe it? I grunted appreciatively. Sounds big. "It's not just big, it's the deal of the century," she shot back, tapping a flyer. "Then we swing by Tech Town for your new noise-canceling headphones. After that, a quick stop at Pet Palace, because Daisy's favorite treats are buy one, get one free." At the mention of her name, Daisy, our 10-year-old beagle mix, lifted her head from her bed by the fireplace. Her tail gave a tentative thump, thump, thump against the cushion. She was the calm center of our universe. The thought of taking her into the supposed chaos had given me pause. "Are you sure we should bring her, Linda?" I'd asked the night before. "Most of these big stores don't allow pets, and you know how she gets around loud noises." Of course, Linda had already thought it through. She'd bought a new reinforced pet sling I could wear on my chest, keeping Daisy snug and secure. "She'll be safer with us than home alone all day," she reasoned, "and they can't say no to a cute dog in a carrier. It'll be fine, protected." It made sense, or at least it did at the time. My role in this annual pilgrimage was simple. I was the muscle and the driver. I didn't share Linda's passion for bargains. To me, Black Friday was a kind of national LARP, live-action role-playing, where everyone agreed for 24 hours that a half-price blender was a treasure worth fighting for. The stories of violence, of people getting trampled, I filed them under urban legend. Exaggerations from the most extreme corners of the country, blown up by the media. The worst we'd face, I figured, was a long line and some grumpy cashiers. "I just don't get the appeal of waking up at dawn to fight a stranger for a toaster," I said, taking another sip of coffee. Linda just smiled that patient smile she saves for my cynical moments. It's not about the toaster, honey. It's about the victory. The thrill of the hunt. I looked over at Daisy, her big brown eyes watching us. She looked so content, so blissfully unaware. I felt a pang of guilt. But Linda was right, wasn't she? She'd be with us, zipped up and safe. What could possibly go wrong? I was so naive, so blissfully dangerously wrong. I viewed the whole thing with a detached amusement, like I was a spectator, not a participant. I had this misguided belief. My cynicism was a shield. Because I wasn't invested in the frenzy, I was somehow immune to it. The horror stories were for other people, the ones who camped out overnight. We were just casuals, dipping our toes in the water. I finished my coffee and wrapped my arms around Linda from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder as I looked at the chaotic mess of flyers. "All right, Captain," I said. "Just tell me where to steer the ship." She laughed. "That's the spirit. It'll be an adventure." An adventure. It's funny, the words you use before you know what they'll mean later. I put on my heaviest coat, zipped Daisy into her sling where she rested her head, and grabbed the keys. The sky was a pale, pre-dawn gray. It felt perfectly, deceptively normal. The first sign that my cynical detachment was a mistake came in the form of headlights. We were still 2 miles from the shopping plaza, and the road, a 4-lane artery usually quiet at this hour, was a solid, unmoving river of red taillights. It wasn't just traffic, it was a parking lot. "Wow," Linda said, peering out the window. "A little busier than I expected." A little busier was an understatement. It was a pilgrimage. Horns were already honking, a frustrated chorus in the cold morning air. Daisy, nestled in her carrier, let out a low, nervous whine. I reached down and stroked her head. "It's okay, girl. Just a lot of cars." My own detached amusement was being pricked by a needle of anxiety. This wasn't the slightly crowded scene I had pictured. This felt different, more desperate. It took us 25 minutes to go 2 miles. The parking lot itself was controlled chaos. Cars circled like sharks, drivers hunting for the flicker of reverse lights. We saw one driver cut off another to steal a spot, sparking a shouting match we could hear even with our windows up. "Good grief," I muttered, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's just a parking spot." I finally found a space in what felt like a different zip code. The walk toward the store was an expedition. The wind was biting as we joined a stream of people, all walking with a purposeful, near-robotic stride toward the glowing entrance. The energy of the crowd was palpable, not festive or joyful. It was tense, the kind of simmering tension you feel in a packed subway car during a delay. Nobody made eye contact. They just stared straight ahead at the doors, as if trying to will them open. As we got closer, the stream of people became a river, then a flood, all funneling toward the main entrance. The doors were set to open at 5 a.m. in 10 minutes, but a massive crowd had already formed, a dense pack of humanity pressing against the glass. "Okay, new plan," Linda said, her voice a little less certain. "We don't need to be at the front. Let's just hang back here." We found a spot near a concrete planter, but the crowd had no edges. It was a living organism that was expanding by the second, swallowing any empty space. Soon we weren't on the periphery, we were just in it. I held Daisy closer. She was trembling, her ears flattened against her head. The murmur of hundreds of people created a constant, unnerving hum. I could feel the subtle push of bodies around me. Then came the first real red flag. A few yards away, two men started arguing about a spot in the non-existent line. "I was here first," one shouted. "You pushed in front of me, I saw you," the other yelled back. The venom in their voices was chilling. No one intervened. People just shuffled away, creating a tiny pocket of space around them. This wasn't just grumpiness. This was hostility. I looked at Linda. The excitement had drained from her face, replaced by concern. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea," she whispered. Before I could answer, a new sound cut through the air. A roar. At the front of the crowd, the automatic doors had slid open, and that's when the slow burn ignited into a wildfire. It wasn't a walk or a rush. It was a surge. The entire mass of people lurched forward as one. The subtle pressure was now a powerful, undeniable shove from behind. I stumbled, catching my balance just in time. I wrapped one arm protectively around Daisy, who was now yelping in fear, and grabbed Linda's hand with the other. "Stay with me," I yelled over the noise. The concept of hanging back was a fantasy. We were caught in the current. The wide entrance to the store was now a horrific bottleneck, squeezing the massive crowd into a space a fraction of its size. The air was thick with the smell of winter coats, coffee breath, and the acrid scent of adrenaline. My feet were barely touching the ground, carried along by the press of bodies. Someone's elbow dug into my ribs. A shopping cart slammed into my leg. I heard a woman shriek. The roar was no longer a collection of voices. It was a single, guttural sound, a beast waking up. This was when my ironic detachment dissolved into cold, primal fear. This wasn't a funny news clip. This was real. The warning signs I dismissed, the traffic, the parking lot rage, were just tremors before the earthquake. The stories weren't exaggerated. If anything, they were sanitized. They couldn't capture the loss of autonomy, the terrifying sensation of being just one small, helpless part of a stampeding herd. We were almost through the doors. I still had Linda's hand. Daisy was whimpering, a high-pitched, terrified sound that was breaking my heart. Just as we cleared the threshold into the store, a large man, his eyes wild, shoved past me with brutal force. The impact sent me staggering, and Linda's hand slipped from mine. 1 second, her hand was in mine. The next, just air. "Linda!" My voice was swallowed by the roar. I twisted, craning my neck, frantically scanning the sea of heads. I saw her for a split second, her face a mask of shock, her arm reaching out. Then she was gone, absorbed by the churning mass. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. A switch flipped. The abstract fear of the crowd became a specific personal terror. My wife was gone. "Linda!" I screamed at this time, a raw, desperate sound. No one heard. No one cared. They were a tide, and the tide only moves one way. The force of the crowd was immense, pushing me deeper into the store, away from where I'd last seen her. Trying to stand still was impossible. Trying to move against the current was like trying to swim up a waterfall. My every instinct screamed to find her. I planted my feet, bracing myself to push back, but it was useless. A wall of bodies simply propelled me forward. I was a log in a flood. My feet tangled with someone else's. I stumbled, my heart leaping into my throat. Falling here meant being trampled. I flailed, my hand catching a shopping cart, and I hauled myself upright. The person pushing it shot me a look of pure fury. Daisy was in a full-blown panic. Her little body vibrated with terror, her claws scrabbling at the fabric. I tightened my arm around her. "I've got you, girl. I've got you," I whispered. More for me than for her. The sensory overload was staggering. Harsh fluorescent lights, the hot, suffocating air, and the noise, a physical assault of rumbling, screeching wheels, a distant crash, and over it all, individual shouts. "It's mine! Get out of my way!" I had to get out of the main aisle. It was a death trap. I saw a gap between a pyramid of paper towels and a row of closed checkout lanes. Using my shoulder like a battering ram, I shoved my way out of the main flow. The pressure lessened. I could breathe. For a second. The chaos was everywhere. People were grabbing things off shelves without looking. Two teenagers were in a tug-of-war over a video game console, screaming at each other. This wasn't shopping. This was looting. A complete breakdown of social order for a cheap television. The psychology of it was terrifying. The crowd had stripped everyone of their individuality, turning them into primal animals. My only objective: find Linda. Get out. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. The call wouldn't connect. Network busy. Of course. I tried a text. "Where are you?" "Near checkouts." It just sat there, unsent, no signal. A fresh wave of panic hit me. We were disconnected, lost, truly on my own. I had to move. I scanned the store, desperately searching for a landmark. I saw the large signs: home goods, grocery, pharmacy. And then I remembered. A terrible idea, but the only one I had. Linda had insisted on a backup meeting spot, a safety precaution I had casually dismissed. "If anything happens," she'd said, "meet by the pharmacy at the back of the store." The pharmacy. It was at the complete opposite end of this madhouse. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic drumming in my chest. I readjusted Daisy's carrier. Protecting her, finding Linda, those were my only thoughts. The deals, the TV, meaningless dust. My morning cynicism felt like a memory from another lifetime, the foolish thought of a man who had no idea what real danger was. The shopping trip was over. This was now an extraction, an escape. And I had no idea if the person I loved most was okay, or where she was, or if I could even get to her. My journey to the pharmacy was a nightmare obstacle course. I abandoned the main aisles and began a desperate scramble through the narrower spaces between shelves. Each aisle was its own pocket of chaos. In the toy section, two grown men were wrestling on the floor over a Lego set. A child was crying nearby, lost, her voice swallowed by the din. I wanted to stop, to help, but the crowd pushed me onward. To stop was to be swallowed. I held my arm over Daisy's carrier, moving with my shoulder forward. People shoved past, their eyes glazed over. I was invisible. An empty shopping cart careened down an aisle and slammed into a shelf, sending a shower of shampoo bottles to the floor. The slick goo became another hazard. My mind was a frantic loop. Where was Linda? Was she hurt? Was she knocked down in that initial surge? The thought was a spike of ice in my gut. I had to keep moving. I cut through Home Goods. It was slightly less crowded, but just as insane. A woman was frantically throwing pillows out of a bin, searching for a specific color. It felt like I was moving through a disaster zone, except the disaster was still happening all around me. Then I saw it, the illuminated green cross of the pharmacy sign. Hope, fragile and thin, flickered in me. The area was calmer. The pull of the doorbusters was weaker here. People were browsing, not stampeding. I scanned the area frantically. No Linda. I stood by the counter, my back against the wall, trying to make myself visible. My heart hammered. Where was she? Did she get out? Did she even make it this far? Minutes stretched into an eternity. Daisy had finally calmed down, exhausted. I unzipped the carrier to peek at her. She looked up with those wide, trusting eyes, and a fresh wave of guilt and anger at myself washed over me for bringing her here. I tried my phone again. Still nothing. I was about to plunge back into the chaos when I heard it. A voice, faint but clear. "Henry!" I spun around. There she was, standing near the aisle for pain relievers, her hair a mess, her coat askew. Her face was pale and tear-streaked, but she was standing. She was whole. The relief was so overwhelming it almost buckled my knees. We met in the middle of the aisle, and I wrapped my arms around her, holding on as if she might dissolve. She buried her face in my chest, her whole body shaking with sobs. "I thought I lost you," she choked out. "The crowd, it just carried me away." "I know," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. "I know. I'm so sorry." We stood there for a long moment, an island of stillness. I pulled back to look at her. She had a smudge on her cheek and a bruise forming on her arm, but she was okay. "Daisy?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She's okay," I said, unzipping it so she could see. "We have to get out of here," Linda said, her voice firm now. Now. But the front entrance was still a raging torrent of people pouring in. Impossible. "There has to be another way out," I said. "An emergency exit." We moved along the back wall, away from the main aisles. Finally, tucked behind a display of wrapping paper, we saw it. A red door with a push bar and a glowing red sign. Exit. I didn't hesitate. I pushed Linda ahead and slammed my hand against the bar. A blaring alarm shrieked, adding another layer to the symphony of chaos. We didn't care. We burst through the door and into the shocking silence of the cold morning air. The moment the heavy fire doors slammed shut, the world changed. The deafening roar was gone, replaced by the shriek of the alarm, and beyond that, a profound silence. We were in a narrow concrete alleyway. The frigid air felt like the cleanest, most wonderful air I had ever breathed. It tasted like freedom. We just stood there for a moment. Linda leaned against the brick wall, her eyes closed, taking deep, shuddering breaths. I gently lifted a trembling Daisy out of the sling and set her on the ground. She immediately pressed herself against my leg. The contrast was surreal. Inside that box, a temporary societal collapse. Out here, the world was still. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east with strokes of pink and orange. It was just a normal Friday. The alarm was a harsh reminder. "We need to go," I said hoarsely. "Let's get to the car." The walk back was long and surreal. From a distance, we could see the flood of people still pouring into the store, the chaos a dull, constant rumble. We passed other shoppers in the lot. Some were triumphant, pushing carts laden with boxes. Others looked as dazed and shell-shocked as we felt. We weren't the only ones who'd been chewed up and spit out. When we finally reached our car, the click of the doors unlocking was the most reassuring sound I had ever heard. Linda slid into the passenger seat and stared straight ahead. I put Daisy in the back, where she curled into the tightest possible ball. I got in, locked the doors, and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. We didn't speak. There were no words, only the shared, silent acknowledgement of what we had just survived. Adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-rattling exhaustion. A dark bruise was already forming on my leg. I finally lifted my head and looked at Linda. A tear was slowly tracing a path down her cheek. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. She nodded, then shook her head. "No, that wasn't shopping, Henry. That was violent." "I know," I whispered. I started the car, the quiet hum of the engine a return to civilization. As we pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The store grew smaller and smaller. I didn't look back again. When we pulled into our driveway, it felt like a sanctuary. The shopping lists were still on the dining room table, a monument to a plan gone horribly wrong. I walked over, gathered them all up, and dropped them in the recycling bin. The thrill of the hunt. What a sick joke. We had survived. That was the only victory that mattered. In the days that followed, the bruises faded, but the psychological impact lingered. For weeks, any loud, unexpected noise would make me jump. I'd find myself instinctively scanning crowds in public, mapping exits, my anxiety rising in enclosed spaces. That casual sense of safety was gone. Linda had nightmares, reliving the moment she was swept away. She, the master planner who loved the energy of a sale, now spoke of it with quiet horror. The thrill of the hunt had become the trauma of the herd. We talked a lot about the ugliness we'd seen, the aggression, the selfishness, the disregard for other people, all for a discount. It had peeled back a layer of civility and shown us something raw and disturbing. Even Daisy was changed, becoming anxious and jumpy around loud noises or too many people. My perspective was fundamentally altered. My old cynicism was a form of arrogance. I had judged the frenzy from a safe distance without understanding its potential for real danger. Retailers can create an environment of artificial scarcity and intense competition, and then act surprised when it turns volatile. I had made the mistake of thinking I was just an observer. But when the doors open and the surge begins, there are no observers. You are either part of the mob or you are in its way. It's been a few years. We do our holiday shopping online now, from the safety of our living room. It's no surprise that millions of people have made the same choice. When I see those familiar clips on the news now, I don't laugh. I feel a cold knot of dread because I know that for some people in that footage, it's not a funny story. It's a terrifying, life-altering event. Our story had a happy ending. We got out. We were safe. But it's a chilling reminder that the line between civilization and chaos can be terrifyingly thin, sometimes only as wide as the automatic doors of a big box store. I went in thinking the stories were an exaggeration. I came out knowing they weren't. I survived, and it changed me forever. I know my story is extreme, but I imagine many of you have felt that tension in a crowd. Have you ever been in a situation, shopping or otherwise, where things started to feel unsafe? Let me know in the comments. I think it's a conversation worth having. Stay safe out there.